Calling this meeting to order. I would like to welcome you all, the public, the applicants, those that are here, my fellow Planning Commission members, Attorney Riddick, Mr. Clark, Director Clary. I'd like to welcome you all here for the Planning Commission meeting for the town of Smithfield for this Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Would you all stand with me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, first thing on the agenda tonight, we have Community Development and Planning Director's Report. Director Clary, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good evening. Town staff are in the process of resolving the pre-existing shipping containers by bringing the applicants into compliance. You do have 4 applications before you this evening. Additionally, the October 2023 Planning Commission meeting, that will be on Thursday, October 12th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Okay. The reason being?
There's a conflict here at the center. There's an expo that they are hosting. And so I believe the same thing happened previously, where we had to move the October meeting to the Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Second item on our agenda tonight is upcoming meetings and activities. I see the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, that has been canceled. But Wednesday, September the 13th, we have a special Board of Historic and Architectural Review meeting. That's at 6 p.m. That's here, I believe that's here. Tuesday, September 12th, the Board of Historic and Architectural Review meeting. Town Council Committee meetings, that's September 25th at 3 p.m. And the Town Council meeting, October 5th, that's 6:30 p.m. here at the center. Thursday, October 12th, 6:30 p.m. next month, for the Planning Commission meeting, also 6:30 p.m. here at the center. Item number 3, we have public comments. Anyone signed up? No one signed up. The public is invited to speak to the Planning Commission on any matters except scheduled public hearings. Please use the sign-up sheet. Comments are limited to 5 minutes. Sign-up sheet, of course, is up here. It's limited to 5 minutes per person. Any required responses from the town will be provided in writing following the meeting. Now, anyone who didn't sign up would like to speak. Would you like to speak now? No? Seeing none. Public comments. That item is closed. Item number 4 is Planning Commission comments. Planning Commission comments. Anyone? Anything? No? Okay. Item number 4, Planning Commission comments. That is closed. Item number 5, we have a discussion item. That's an entrance corridor overlay district guideline update. Director Clary, is there a report?
No, sir, there is not a report, but I would like to introduce our consultants who's here to go ahead and interact with the Planning Commission to get this process started for our corridor overlay update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you
Yes.
so much for having me. My name is Meredith Johnson. I am the representative of Johnson Planning and Preservation. I will be presenting on the entrance corridor overlays. There's a presentation behind you, and I believe it was handed out before here as well. Who should I direct to slides? Oh, slide, please.
Oh, and please remind us, speak into the mic.
Yes.
There's a remote audience listening in as well. I'm sure they would like to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Okay, please let me know if I need to adjust in any other way. Thank you so much. This evening, Commissioners, I will be running through a brief overview about my company, the scope of this project. Then we'll move into our existing conditions analysis of the existing design guidelines for the entryway corridors. And then we'll summarize the findings, and then we'll move on to a discussion. The discussion is intended to be the meat of this conversation tonight. So the existing conditions, as well as the intro, will be relatively brief. Slide, please. So very quickly, my name is Meredith Johnson. I've been in business as Johnson Planning and Preservation for about 3.5 years now. I'm a preservationist and urban planner. I have a bachelor's degree from Texas State, a master's from the University of Pennsylvania, and I've been working in planning and preservation for over 12 years now. As I mentioned, we've been in business for about 3.5 years. We started in Philly, moved to Austin. Our clients range from public to private to nonprofit, and we really enjoy merging historic preservation and urban planning. So I think this entryway corridor overlay project has been really perfect for us. Slide. So I'm going to move right into the findings here. Slide, please. So the overview for our project today is we're looking at 6 entryway corridors. There is one set of overlay guidelines that applies to all 6 corridors. We are looking, our scope for the project is to revise those design guidelines as you and staff see fit. So that's what we're here talking about today. So you can see this is your map from your existing guidelines. They were adopted in 2005. As I mentioned, there are 6 corridors that are affected by these guidelines. Next slide. I am going to go through the corridors individually and discuss our observations for each one. Before we get there, I'd like to go through some of the stated goals from your 2005 ECO guidelines. I will not read all of this. Instead, slide. I will summarize by highlighting the 3 primary factors that we think most describe your guidelines today. So we found the first goal from your guidelines to be conserve. This doesn't necessarily just apply to environmentally sensitive areas. You can see it also applies to things like view sheds, which could also be architectural elements as well. You have number 2, protect and enhance. Again, this does not just end with your environmentally sensitive areas or your historic, your over 50 years of age areas. This applies to your whole corridor, your entire city. How do people perceive your city when they drive in? How do they shop? How do they move? Where do they go when they want to shop for houses and eventually live in Smithfield? And then 3, we want to ensure a high quality future development. So this is something that we really honed in on for our initial findings. We really wanted to look at because we're revising these, we wanted to look at what do you envision as your future and what does a high quality future mean to you? Slide. So I'm going to turn this around on you pretty quickly. I'd like to know, what do these future eco guidelines need to accomplish? And then second, I'm going to ask you, how do you envision achievement in those accomplishments that you've just identified? This can be pretty quick. You can blurt out a couple things if you feel like it.
This is where we're supposed to answer, right?
Yes, please. I do teach, so I will call on you by name.
The concept of which we like with the ECO and that we've talked about is just highly landscaped areas, attractive buildings and facades with the emphasis on brick, and generally a clean aesthetic that goes from one end of town to the other, so that we kind of brand the town itself, and you don't get a hodgepodge of mix in there, and that's what the ECO has done. And then we have that set, I believe it's 500 feet off our corridor, so that as we transit town, you don't see that for the first 50 feet, and then you look behind that and there's something of lower quality. So, the whole goal is very much is to ensure not only the high quality of future development, but the high quality of current development in town. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Anything to add? I don't have anything
okay.
myself.
I would add one other thing, because your question there is how do the future guidelines achieve these accomplishments? And so what we need to do is make sure that as we write these, that there's reasonable enforcement in place. One of the things that we failed to do somewhere along the line, or tried to do better, is that we have landscaping requirements, but we don't have provisions that once the building's built, the landscaping's upkept, whether it be through sprinkler systems or some other mechanism to do so. So not only do we achieve these day one when they come in and build it, but day 4,000, it still looks as nice as it did on day one, and a mechanism to maintain that.
Absolutely.
I mean, the only other guideline for us is if you have an existing property, at what point do you bring them back to full compliance to the ECO guideline? That's always a sticky subject of when does somebody want to change the exterior, when they want to do this, what do they want to upgrade, and when do we say, fine, make the upgrades, you're not in full compliance, when do we make them switch over?
Thank you.
Good points. Nothing else? Anything else?
So one of the things that we thought when we were doing our initial review was really important, and we thought these guidelines maybe wanted to achieve for the future, is alignment with the new comprehensive plan. So we're hoping, some of the feedback we're hoping to get from you tonight is how might these guidelines envision or affect or bring to fruition the goals set forth by the comprehensive plan. And I'll go into a little bit of detail of what that may or may not look like, and then I'll come back and ask you guys some more questions. Slide. So first I want to introduce you to this concept of transect zones. Has anyone heard of this before? Okay, we've got a couple hands. Great. So you may know that this is aligned with one type of code. It's called a form-based code. We're not pushing you to a form-based code, but I do believe this model helps us to understand the existing landscape opportunities that Smithfield currently contains. So you can see on the far left, we have our number one, which is nature. As we move to the right, it moves into a rural. So the difference, nature is very untouched. It's as it is, as it occurs in nature. Rural, you may think of as light touch, maybe your low density residential areas, maybe your agricultural areas, something extremely low density, but has a little bit more construction happening. A neighborhood residential might be your traditional neighborhood. It could be a newer neighborhood with a little bit of commercial in there. But for the most part, we're looking at this to be a pretty classic single family, maybe a little bit of duplex or triplex, but fairly low residential area. Our historic commercial, number 4 there, is where we start to integrate more commercial activity. You start to see more vertically mixed-use buildings like your historic district naturally has. You can also start to see more mix of uses in buildings that might be surprising. So house form commercial is really common in this type of district. And then number 5, all the way to the right, is our highway corridor. You definitely have this. All of these aerials exist in Smithfield. So all of these are contained in Smithfield today. Your highway corridor tends to exist, as mentioned, along highways. But we have noticed that there's some highway corridor that exists inside the city limits and even along these eco lines. So we really want to address that with you. And the way that I would think about your transect zones is that we might be in a category 5 for some of our eco areas. They might be leaning a little bit more highway. We might have really huge parking lots. We might have, this is exaggerated, but like a 200-foot sign, something extremely big. It's made for you to see when you're traveling 70 miles an hour. Nowhere in Smithfield is it 70 miles an hour. So there's no reason for that type of design to exist along these areas. So we want to transition you from a number 5 in some of these areas to maybe a number 4. Maybe we'll be looking at like a heavily commercial area, but it's walkable. Or maybe it's got some vertical mixed use. So maybe we've got a shop on the bottom and an office on top. Or even reverse, maybe you've got an office on the bottom and a bar on top. Could be crazy, could be cool, could work. But the point here is that we want to look at what does Smithfield want to be, where are you currently, and where is your ideal zone on this spectrum. Does that make sense? Great.
Yes,
Slide,
makes
please. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are using your master plan as kind of our guiding star here. We don't necessarily need to copy what's already in the master plan. You already did that work. That's done. Now we want to look at execution. So when we look at your master plan and we overlay the eco on top of it, we label the districts, we can see all of the future land uses that we're planning to touch with our overlay. So we know, this is a little far for me to read at this point, I apologize. So we know that most of our districts are going to be touching a pretty dense commercial area, a mixed use area. You can see that deep red is heavy commercial, but it does allow for a mix of uses. We would like our overlay, or we're working to figure out what our overlay looks like when we transition from mostly house form or rural or even natural landscapes to a more dense use, a more mixed use, a more human use even. Slide, please. Okay. Very quickly, I'm going to go through our findings of the corridors as they exist today. Now, this is not what the guidelines say. This is what's on the ground and some of the data points that correlate to each of these corridors. So our first corridor is our North Church Street Business Road 10 corridor. I'm calling it Eco 1. So we know that this area is primarily zoned industrial. We're also looking at an innovation district over here. When we walked this area, it was very representative of the zoning, which is good. That means your uses and zoning are aligned. That means your zoning map is appropriate, which is great. We also noticed that in front of the factory that there were actually a lot of pedestrian improvements. So we saw rumble strips. We saw signage for, flashing signage for crossings. We saw marked crossings. This was the only district where we really made a lot of those observations in such a short distance. It's very concentrated. Your transect zones for this overlay are primarily natural and highway. Industrial tends to fall in between, where it could be seen or interpreted as dense commercial, but in this case, it is very sprawled. You have one side of the street that is a full parking lot, and the other side is the full industrial complex. So it really achieves that highway mentality of not a lot to slow you down, very big spaces, very open. In your future land use map, you have it as continuing that use and even intensifying that use, moving it into a heavy industrial space. Slide, thank you. Okay, Eco 2 is West Main Street and US Route 258. This was about an average size for your overlays. This was right in the middle in terms of the sizing. Your zoning is primarily commercial here, and then your uses on the ground vary between commercial and residential. So this tells us that you have human activity there at all hours of the day. Your transect for this is going to be historic commercial, and you might be thinking, why? This is not in our historic district. It's purely because of the layout. You've got a lot of dense parcels together. You don't have huge tons, massive amounts of space. You know, we're not looking at 100-acre plats or anything. We're looking at relatively small, individually owned properties that could come up for development, and when and if they do, their property lines really adhere to that historic pattern that already existed. For your future land use map, we're seeing that commercial mixed use, that again is representative of that historic commercial transect, and then parks and recreation, which is really interesting because it's an improved parks and recreation space. It's not natural space, it's improved. Thank you. Eco 3, I found this district fascinating. It's South Church Street. This area was really quite surprising because, again, it is representative of that historic commercial transect zone based on the land pattern. Just in the aerial, and when you look at the GIS, you can see that the lots are a bit smaller. You can see that most of the lines are pretty straight. The lines being your roads are fairly straight. We're looking at almost a grid pattern with some slight variations to it. The use on the ground is very interesting. It is leaning heavily commercial, but you still have a lot of residential forms in your architecture. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what your future land use map is asking for and what's currently on the ground. They're a little bit in conflict here. Thank you. This section, I believe it was your smallest. This falls similarly as Eco 3, though the transect aligns more highway than historic commercial or even a downtown commercial. Recall that the highway transect really means that we have lots of wide open spaces. Usually when you're looking at these wide open spaces, it's from your windshield. So when you're driving and it seems very big, you can see the sign for McDonald's, 3 miles away, you know exactly where you're going. That's when you kind of know you're in a highway space. And that's what this area tends to feel like. When we look at your future land use map, we do see an additional expansion on that by moving into corridor mixed use. The deviation is that mixed use. So you could do a mixed use that leans very heavily commercial, but it also could be a mixed use that integrates some of that existing house form. Next, thank you. Number 5, this is your longest overlay eco. This one is relatively complex because it is the longest. It goes from one end of town to the other. In doing that, it touches on several zonings, it touches on several uses, and it touches, unsurprisingly, on several transects. Almost each transect is represented here. I took out highway because that really does not quite meet that highway, but it's a little close because of Eco 4. So for your future land use, when we're looking at this very long section, you have a lot going on, and that's not surprising. You're touching on, this is essentially a swath of your entire town. It's a sample. So for your future land use, you're seeing commercial mixed use, corridor, parks, residential mixed use, and traditional residential. All of that is currently represented on the ground as well. However, it is offset from your eco. So when we look at the future land use, we want to consider what's going to actually touch this road, what's going to meet that 500-foot barrier. Next, thank you. Okay, finally, number 6. This is the Battery Park Road. I'm going to my notes. They're here. I learned the most about the Battery Park Road Eco Corridor today in experiencing the county-owned bike path, which was a great add to this discussion, I think, even if it's not reflected right here. I thought that was interesting because it adds an additional element of connectivity that doesn't necessarily exist on the rest of the corridors. So with this, we're looking again at heavily residential and conservation zoning. And with that, we're looking at heavily residential and agricultural or open land type uses. There's some development on the ground that's not fully reflected in this aerial, but it is in process on the ground. And then we also know that there's a conversation about extending this corridor to meet the new city limits. So we know that this corridor will receive, will receive a lot more attention than maybe some of the other corridors, but it is justified. It's getting attention from the county, it's getting attention from city council to move the city limits. So there's a lot happening here. For your future land use, interestingly, you're looking primarily at residential mixed use, followed by neighborhood residential. So half of this is staying in line with what's on the ground, and about half of it is moving in a different direction. Slide. Thank you. So,
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Quick question for you. I noticed that we have what I consider one of our entrance corridors is our historic district of Main Street. And almost every other main thoroughfare in town is listed as part of the ECO, but the historic district is not at all. And what's the reasoning behind that? Is that because it's protected already under the historic district guidelines?
I believe so, but maybe Tammy has something to add.
That was my understanding, that it was part of the HPO overlay, and so the HPO kind of protected the historic district with more stringent architectural standards for that particular area.
Does it make sense to include it now? I mean, as we're going through these guidelines to make sure that we're consistent throughout town, or do we just allow that HPO to hold its place? I mean, that really, I mean, when I was looking at what's missing, it's from the bridge here, outside of us, to the Smithfield Station Bridge to Main Street and 10, which is our historic district.
That is correct. That would require the applicants to come before Planning Commission for ECO review and approval, along with the BHAR.
We don't have to decide tonight, but I think it's worth considering. If, you know, every other thoroughfare through town is covered, and maybe the HPO does enough, but I think it's worth a conversation worth having while we go through the guidelines anyhow. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that add, Commissioner Pack. I think that's a really great question, and I hope some of the questions here in a minute will come back to that.
Okay.
So
Great.
That's great. Thank you. Any other comments, questions to add in here? Okay.
I got one other for you, sorry.
Yes.
ECO 6, Battery Park Road, uses residential and agriculture, and that's certainly the way it exists today. 2 years ago, there was a pretty large development approved in that. Are you aware of the development that's coming to that area?
What is it called?
It's the Mallory Scott Farm. So most of the agricultural
Yes.
fields that you're seeing there will be developed. So
Yeah.
this is certainly one of those times we want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row so that when this development comes, they abide by our regulations. So I just want to make sure you are aware of it. I know we are, and likely the public, but just want to make sure that when we're looking at this, that you know that.
Exactly what we're here for. Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
And that was part of her suggest that we had discussed about extending the ECO out to the new property line, and that way the entrance landscaping and entrance signs of that development would come to Planning Commission for ECO review.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you again. To briefly summarize the findings from our, To summarize the findings from our document review, as well as some of the time that we spent on site today, the first finding that we really honed in on was that some of the districts have shared characteristics, but they don't necessarily align or have shared future land uses. So that's important because right now your guidelines really sort of umbrella over top, and I don't necessarily think it's worth going through to make individual guidelines for each overlay. However, there are differences in each of these overlays that should be acknowledged. 2, implementation between the time of adoption in 2005 and today appears really sporadic on the ground. And that's not due to any failure. That's not due to anything. But that does make us wonder, what is the effect of these guidelines and what do you want to see on the ground? If these are not accomplishing that, or if they're not being triggered appropriately, how do you want that to occur? And what do you want it to look like when you have it occur? 3, these design guidelines affect the full length of each district. We're not honing in on one part. There's not one entryway. There's not one portion of each road that is very important. It's the whole corridor. So when we look at it, we're not just looking at Eco 3 has a concentration of businesses, therefore Eco 3 all has commercial standards. No, we're working on a spectrum. We want to think about the transect. We want to think about where are we landing on the spectrum in this section today, and what do we want it to look like in the future. And then 4, the districts carry, for the most part, elements from the historic district. So what we really observed was the historic district as the heart of Smithfield, and this is actually relevant if you were to go look at the Sanborn maps in time, along the timeline, you would see that there's a core to Smithfield that starts, in the center or in your historic downtown. And similar to the way that you might add a new room or a bathroom or a second story to a house, the city receives additions as well, right? We get a new neighborhood, we get a new shopping center, we get a new whatever. And so the way that everything is put together, it's not piecemealed. It's just additions to a house that happen over time. So what we're looking at are elements that do express Smithfield, but are just extrapolated over a period of time. So what we'll be doing is trying to figure out what those defining elements are and rope them back in for you guys. Any questions about our findings?
I have none. I think it's rather well done. Mike, one of my questions, I suppose, would be, and not necessarily to you, is what we're trying to accomplish on South Church Street from the bridge, I'll just say to Battery Park Road intersection. This is highway retail, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of it was to our comprehensive plans to make this look more like downtown Smithfield. And is there anything we could do? Anything you would suggest?
You're leading us straight into the next session.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Chairman.
Okay.
Slide, please. Discussion. Slide. You can move. The next one, yeah. Okay, so we are aware that there is a plan for Church Street, and we are aware that there's a conversation about making that walkable, and we are aware that there are visual elements that go with that are available in your master plan. So we know that you've already done the work to envision a future of Church Street that is walkable, that seems denser, that maybe has a variety of transportation modes on it. So I don't want to rehash what you just did for your master plan. That's not the conversation tonight. This is going to be very focused on these overlays and this guideline. So when we think about that, first we're going to start by just considering the corridors. We focused on Church Street, vision of some of those corridors, and this is just open. So please feel free to speak if you'd like.
What do you mean by the best version of them? What are you looking with, the best elements of them, or the best? Man, I love the packing plants. It looks great. I love their crosswalk. I mean, or do you want to know what's the best part of that industrial piece. I'm not following the question.
Yeah. So to me, the best version is, when do you think of that street as being a good, beautiful, or at least functional or safe street?
What would it take to get us there, you mean? Or which part of it is the best?
Let's jump to question 2, and we can come back to this. Actually, if you want to jump maybe one more slide. Yes, okay. So this is the line of questioning. This is the interrogation. So what is the best version of each corridor? If the best version of Church Street is this walkable utopia, what is the best version of Eco 1 up by the Smithfield plant?
I'm still struggling to figure out what.
Does it have a sidewalk?
You mean, what are we gonna change up by the packing plant?
Yeah,
Up in that area?
would you add a sidewalk there? Would you add more trees?
Landscaping in all of our corridors is important to me.
Okay. This is
And
good.
with that, I mean mature hardwood trees.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, nice, appropriate landscaping
Mm-hmm.
that is somewhat self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put a flower you have to plant every year. That's not sustainable
Mm-hmm.
landscaping. We've done a really nice, if you're in front of the Smithfield Center out here, we have a great brick wall with brick sidewalks and some mature trees and some lighting. Very simple, but very elegant.
That's
and
true.
I'd like to see that throughout town wherever we can.
Okay. When we think about Eco Corridor 3, which is the Church Street corridor, what kind of materials do you guys envision? I'm assuming brick. What other building materials would you put there?
The issue there, though, is built out. And so the only development that's going to occur is going to occur because something's torn down and rebuilt. So right now, you've got 1950 houses on one side of the street and 7-Eleven and a gas station and another old gas station, it's a restaurant that the architecture's defined.
Okay.
So unless somebody's tearing something down and putting it back, then they have to come back into full compliance with whatever we're deciding tonight. And that, but
And to
I don't see the materials changing until people actually demolish.
Okay.
And to your point earlier, Tom, like 7-Eleven's closed, right? So somebody's probably going to buy that and bring us something in the future, I would guess. At what point do we say, well, here's your 7-Eleven, and it's always been a 7-Eleven, so we're not going to force whatever on you. When do we do that? And that's one of the questions that we need to figure out, because it'd be great, because if you don't, and 7-Eleven becomes another place. And Q-Days looks nice, it really does, far better than what it ever did. But there's not much room up front. There's no room for the bike path that we have planned there. It's really tough. So what point do we say, all right, 7-Eleven, you can go in there and be whatever it is you're planning to be, but you got to bring up to the ECO design guidelines, and that's really tough on that particular lot. I mean, that Eco 3 is a difficult place, because you're right. Until something sells and somebody tears it down. The changes in our comprehensive plan show some really imaginative pictures, and they bring all the buildings to the front, and they make it very walkable, but, I mean, there's probably 50 different properties there. And getting them all on board you have to plan for it, but it's not gonna happen tomorrow, it's not gonna happen in 10 years, it may happen in 50.
Yeah, you're so right. I feel like you guys are answering question 3, which is extremely helpful. What prevents or assists this vision? I'm hearing property ownership. I'm hearing existing structures and maybe even some existing standards. The setback for one I'm hearing, that's not going to be changed tomorrow. You're absolutely correct. How does the future of Eco 3 compare to what it is today in use? As a user of Eco 3, how does it compare to the illustrations of the master plan?
There's no walkability along that road at all.
No.
Okay.
It's not safe.
And we have for no walkability on it, there's a lot of people walking it,
Yeah.
and they're walking on yards and side yards and edges of roads. I mean, for no walkability, there's a lot. So I mean, that is a huge start, is to make that a walkable and safely walkable area. You know, and there is a plan to do that, but it's a fairly intensive plan that is, you know, and by intensive, I mean expensive. You know, because a roadway there can't just be redone, it has to be rolled and brought up to new standards. I think our last quote was north of 20 million to do that. Which is a hindrance, because I mean, that's how you change Eco 3 to start off with, is you make it, you put some, you know, some room in there with some landscaping and some walkability to it.
Interesting. Okay,
And then perhaps the buildings follow behind that.
interesting.
Question,
Yeah.
and perhaps you can answer this, Councilman Pike. What side of the road is it proposed that this walkway, bike path be on?
The proposals are for the 7-Eleven side.
The 7-Eleven side?
Yes, sir. Former 7-Eleven side. We'll call it the Q Daddy side.
Let's
Okay.
go to the next slide. I really appreciate you guys and working with me on those questions. We'll come back to those because I think seeing some examples might help. And we can come back to this section too. So can we jump to examples, please? I think it's like 5 slides down. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, examples. So first I want to define this, quote, good design that planners often talk about. It might be different from, I don't know if any of you are architects or work in architecture. It's a little bit different from what good design may be considered in architecture. For planners, we think about the full ecosystem here. So we think about safety. We want to accommodate a variety of users. We think about sustainability. This specifically, for me in this case, it's coming back to what are the long-term maintenance costs for this jurisdiction? What does physical maintenance look like? How many people? What does it cost? And what's the longevity of that? Design, we're looking primarily at a human scale, so something that feels, again, accessible to you as a person, not necessarily the McDonald's sign that you see from 6 blocks away. And then representative of your desired architecture. So in this case, we know that there's a big colonial style here that's very definitive of this location and this locale. You would never see any of these buildings anywhere else except for Smithfield. So we want to make sure that that is really important. And then finally, environment, the diversity and the conservation of that natural space. Slide. I will very briefly introduce you to the concept of a strode. A street, think about downtown Smithfield when you're walking down Main Street in that historic district, that's a street. When you're walking down Eco 3 and you're fearing for your life, but you're not sure why there are so many pedestrians there with you, that's a strode. We're looking at something in the middle here. A lot of your, specifically that Eco 3 and 4 are falling into the strode category fairly quickly. You still have some time with Ecos like 1 and 2, and I would argue even 5 and 6. They tend to be a little bit more on the road side because we have pretty definitive uses. They're not mixed in horizontally. Remember, we really like more of a vertical mixed use rather than a horizontal mixed use. Slide. Thank you. So this slide is a little bit overwhelming, and I apologize. It's not beautiful. The top image here shows a transect, which is a slice, like a slice of cake. You can see right in the middle. It shows a transect of a strode. So this is an area that has sidewalks, is sort of said to be walkable, but user experience tells you it's a lot more car-oriented than human-oriented. In this case, we're looking at maybe 20, 30 feet setbacks. We're looking at 12-foot lanes all the way across, and a total of 12 feet for pedestrians across both sides of that road. So not a lot of walkability. Maybe hits on that unsafe side. The speed limit there is 45, so we're moving fairly fast. We could definitely, find some people with our vehicle. When we look at the bottom, it's very different, right? We see trees, we see those buildings, we see a variety of people and humans moving throughout the space. The list that I made for you on the right, those are all elements that already exist in your eco guidelines. So this is not reinventing the wheel. We're not recreating these guidelines from scratch. We're using the elements that you already regulate and just altering them. One of the main things that I think is really important to note here is that for Smithfield today, a lot of your sidewalks measure at 5 feet. That's not very big. I'm taller than 5 feet. In this example here, even the unsafe example has wider sidewalks than what Smithfield has today. And then even as we go further down, they're even wider, which tells you that people will come and you will have wider sidewalks and the infrastructure will work for itself. Everything is an ecosystem in this space. We're not going to just add wide sidewalks and nothing else. That does nothing. It has to be done in a complete package. I also want to point out that the plantings, it's the first item there at the top, just diverse plantings, that alone would make a huge difference in these two spaces because we're looking at more vertical space, which carries your eye up, which brings you from, not concentrating on the roadway and allows you to slow down and appreciate the space. And as a driver, it makes it safer. You will naturally slow down with the presence of more vertical elements like taller plantings. So when we're talking about the types of landscaping, we want to think about what's the overall goal we're trying to achieve, not just beautification, but also safety, also pedestrians, also shade, also wind cover, etc. The list goes on. Slide. Thank you. These are some examples of guidelines that you could see. I wanted to include this because I think it's so different from what you're used to seeing in your guidelines, but I think this feels more approachable. It feels like you could define the space on what Smithfield is today and where it wants to go. It does feel flexible, though. It doesn't feel prescriptive in the sense that you have to do this or you can't be here. It feels like there's options. So I think the tone of some of the messaging here can also help to carry your goals to fruition. I think you'll want to skip the next 3 slides. Oh, nope, I was wrong. Go back 2. Okay. This is an example of something you actually already have in your downtown, but has not found its way outside of your downtown. So when we're thinking about adding pedestrians and adding people, there are incremental processes that you guys have already taken on to make some of these spaces more walkable and a little safer, or at least draw attention to the fact that there are going to be humans here. These bulb outs are a really great example. And like I said, you've already put them in place. So you have an example that you could bring an applicant to and show them how it works and show them how it got passed. Next. Okay. This is a great before and after. I'll leave you with this. So this is a road in San Diego that at one point was a strode. It had really gone off the rails. That was 2 lanes of traffic that were like 15 feet wide, plus parking. So there was a lot happening. They went ahead and added some bulb outs. They did do a roundabout, which is where this image is taken, but the streetscape is primarily what's changed. And I think what's interesting here is that it's changed within the parameters that you already regulate in your guidelines. So again, we're looking primarily at landscaping. We're looking at architecture. We're looking at signage. And then we're looking at the pedestrian infrastructure.
Question, Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
You have experience with roundabouts anywhere in
I do, but I will say it's primarily in Texas, which is not exactly the most roundabout-friendly location.
Your overall opinion, what do you think of them?
I think from a jurisdictional perspective, they can be very expensive and may not always result in what you're looking for. But if you've done the research and your engineers are approving it, which is always the harder part,
Would you think they move traffic better than a red light?
I think the data shows that they often do, but I don't think it's for every single intersection. And I think a lot of that is cost prohibitive.
Thank you.
We can go back to the discussion items if you want, but I would maybe recommend leaving it here and we can follow up on those discussion items. But if anyone has anything to add or any additional questions, all ears.
Where do we go from here? What's next step?
Great question. So our next steps, we're basically taking your feedback and we're going to start drafting out some guidelines, some directions of where we might go. Tonight, we need to figure out what direction we want to take this document. Do you want this to be, a goal-oriented document that aligns with your master plan and is executing on the visions that you've already discussed? Or are we looking for maybe a more elemental document that talks about each piece of a development and regulates it similar to what you have? So that's really the purpose, or what I really need to get out of you tonight, plus any additional feedback you have about the effectiveness of the guidelines and where you want them to go.
I personally see this as a working document. I'll pick on Dr. Sachs since he's here tonight, but he's a developer and he needs a document to go by to say what do they want in the town so that he can present an appropriate project that hits the guidelines the first time.
Okay.
And we don't have, if we give him all this esoteric stuff and we want this, we want that, that's great in theory, but he needs a working document. His team needs to be able to say, we like brick, not stucco, not wood, or this is what we're shooting for, and this, that, and the other. So to me, we've got a lot of stuff that says we like this in our future land use map and our overall plans and zoning, but we need a working document for project people that are coming in to say, we're doing this. What do we want to see? How many of the checklist items can they hit the first time so they're not spending money on development and reworking stuff? And so to me, this needs to be a working document that says if you're in this area, this is what you go to design your stuff the way you feel like it designs and how does it fit in with our plan. That's what I see this document as.
100% agreed, Dr. Vogt.
Thank you, Commissioner Pope. That's great. Anything else?
Anything else?
I will add, Mr. Johnson, I don't think that the ECO guidelines we have now are awful by any stretch. You know, we haven't touched them since 2005. They do need some updating. And I think to Dr. Pope's point, I mean, it'd be really nice to have there's nothing more frustrating for a developer than to come several times because the Planning Commission hasn't been clear with what their expectations are. There's nothing more frustrating than the public to not know what the expectations are. And then, I think that's kind of where we are. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Pack. Yes.
Any other? Julie, none?
No, I just wanted to ask, Meredith, will we be doing the same exercise tomorrow night with BHAR as well, same sort of thing?
Can,
Okay, but same sort of process with the Board of Historic Contract review tomorrow night? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else?
great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you, Ms. Johnson.
much. I really appreciate the opportunity to help you with this. The last thing I'll say is that when it comes to code, we're planning for the future, but you will get what you ask for. So we really want to make sure that we're asking for the right stuff. So I will leave you with that. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Planning for the future. Thank you.
you don't know what you don't know. So she needs to give you some suggestions.
Yes.
Because all we know is what we know. And how, you know, she said that we have a colonial influence. Well, that's true. But the thing that makes Smithfield so great is that it is a amalgam of lots of different architectural styles. And so are you going to set up a bunch of guidelines and say all the entrance corridors are going to be colonial? If that's what she hears from you, that's what she's going to give you. So you have to make
Right, I
decisions
mean,
about
Randy,
those
if you were
things.
building the station, would you want it to be brick? I don't think so.
No.
So you
So,
can't.
we can't just say we want brick.
No, and like I said, you don't know what you don't know. She's saying you're gonna get what you want, but I think you have to give them some
You
ideas.
get what you ask for.
Okay, but you have to, well, you have to give them some ideas and say, what do you think about this? And then, I mean, you're the expert.
Yeah, so the way our process typically works is that we do an initial overview with the jurisdiction. We review their documentation, we review everything that they've put out publicly, and then we do a document request and ask for items that are a little bit more behind the scenes. We look at some projects with them. We do site visits. We had a full day of conversation today about this. And then when we talk to you guys, get your feedback, I'm going to follow up with more questions. I'm sorry, but there's going to be more. I'm going to ask you for a little bit more a little more creativity, a little more thoughtfulness in some of these ideas. But then we will come back and give you examples. And that's where we'll really get the litmus test of what amount of change are you accepting? What amount of staying the same are we accepting? And then what amount of transference, maybe from the historic district, for example, are we going to accept? And that's where we'll really start to draw the lines and build up the illustrations and build out the actual guidelines. So you're absolutely correct. We will be coming back with illustrations. We will be coming back with examples. This is the exploration phase, is kind of what we call it. It's silly, but yes.
The only thing I would say is, these were a pretty good first shot, but they were kind of modeled after the existing historic district guidelines, which have a lot more detail about the different elements. This is very general, and to Randy's point, Mr. Pack's point, and to Tom's point, Dr. Sachs and any other developer or property owner says, what do you want? Show me examples of things that are acceptable in, give us some guidelines, because otherwise, if you just say it in words, they got no idea.
Yeah,
So
you're absolutely right.
You gotta give them something that one of these professionals can pick up and go, yep, I know what Smithfield wants. Here's about 3 or 4 different options, and this is the way we can go. Which one do you like, Dr. Sachs? And then he's got some guidance, and he doesn't have to guess.
Love that. That's our goal.
I agree.
He's shaking his head back there up and down.
Hit the nail on the head. That was a better closing statement than mine. Thank you.
Yes, but Attorney Riddick, to your point, you mentioned brick. Isn't there about 3 different materials that's acceptable in the ECO?
Well,
I think hardy plank, was hardy plank one?
I think so.
Yeah.
But there needs, you know, we talked about this in the historic, BHAR all the time. Materials are evolving, and we're stuck in the past from 20 years ago when we thought hardy plank was the be-all and end-all, and they keep coming up with new and more versatile products, and maybe we need to know about those too. And that's, I don't see anybody in this planning commission that knows a lot about that, I don't think. And so maybe we need to get some information from them about that.
Yes.
Can our guidelines suggest that they bring samples and materials with them instead of just pictures all the time?
Sure.
We requested a lot at BHAR, especially windows, because they're a big deal to BHAR.
We always use the term or approved equal. So if you said it should be hardy plank or approved equal, and that gives the commission an opportunity to examine that, you know, whatever that material may be.
We kind of need to get, that's a brand name, we probably need to call it cementitious or cementitious siding.
Cementous siding, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's, but then there are these new products like, well, AZEK, and I don't really know what it is, but
Right.
it's a composite.
Plastic
It
trim
looks-
board.
Well, it looks like wood, and it's
Yeah.
very, you know, at a distance, you wouldn't know the difference, and so it's very often used for trim. Things like that are the kind of stuff you need to know about, so you can say, yeah, that's okay.
All right, declare. Did you check what materials in the ECO? Is wood one of them?
I'm sure wood's gotta be one of them.
Yes, so it's on page 43, and it's number 2, choose materials that offer texture, for example, wood, brick, stone, stucco, or any new synthetic materials.
New synthetic material. Okay, good.
And Ian, stone is always a conundrum, because we don't have a lot of stone around here. That's not indigenous, really. It's not an indigenous material, and so it kind of, very often, it kind of looks out of place. When somebody tries to do something that looks, you know, it just doesn't fit very often. But, I mean, that's, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess, but.
Good point. Anything else? No? Well, that's item number 5. And again, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Moving on, we have item number 6. This is an entrance corridor overlay application. This is for 1305 South Church Street, the DMV Retail. Dr. Warren Sykes, applicant. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking entrance corridor overlay review and approval for the mixed-use restaurant retail building located at 1305 South Church Street. The proposed building will feature a combination of red brick, stone veneer, EIFS, cylinder lights, aluminum windows, awnings, and a gutter system. The EIFS will be painted in a light brown color, manor white. The lower portions will feature stone veneer known as Old World Ledge Stone in Brookside, which features a ledge separating the stone veneer from the red brick. The front will feature Kingsport Colonial red brick and 6 awnings, 4 of which are black, 2 of which are red, 5 cylinder lights, and 16 floor-to-ceiling windows. There will also be 2 circular architectural features. The front doors, once installed, will be a traditional storefront black aluminum swinging door. The front of the building does not currently feature any doors. However, the applicant has stated that any window can be replaced to accommodate a door, allowing flexibility for potential businesses. The left and right sides will be completely identical, each featuring manor white EIFS, brick and stonework. It will have 4 windows, 4 cylinder lights, 1 awning, and 1 circular architectural design. Furthermore, the rear of the building will also have 4 steel doors, 2 cylinder lights, 1 exterior light over each door, single roof access ladder, and 4 scupper and downspout gutters to allow for stormwater runoff. The applicant has stated that the rear doors can be painted if the Planning Commission so desires. Town staff do recommend that approvals of this ECO overlay application under the following conditions. A zoning permit with a $75 application fee will be required for the construction of the mixed-use building. And when the applicant is ready to proceed with any detached signage, a sign application and fee payment will be required, provided any signage exterior changes must be reviewed by the Planning Commission if applicable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the applicant being here, would you like to come forward and make any other statements?
Thank you.
And please state your name and address for the record, please.
Of course. My name is Brad Martin. I'm a civil engineer with WPL Site Design in Virginia Beach. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Dr. Sachs, who is here. Also, a couple of the folks that are currently involved in the DMV construction are here, Eddie Fredericks and Brian Bolger with the Woodard Group. Before I would get started, I would just offer to Ms. Johnson, if you want to know what they don't like, I'll be happy to meet with you afterwards over a cocktail or something. Thank you for laughing at that. That's what that was intended to do. Thank you. You all may remember, I'm just the dumb dirt guy. I'm the civil engineer. I'm here to pinch hit for our architect, Eugene Thompson of Ionic Design Studios. And he apologizes for not being able to be here tonight. I was not integrally involved in this architectural design, obviously, as a civil engineer. But what I understand is that they put about 9 different renderings of elevations in front of you. And the ones of you that responded, it seems like everybody that responded identified number 1 as a decent, acceptable elevation of materials and facades and everything. So that's what we've come for approval today. I do want to make a couple of clarifications. The glass that we're using is going to be clear glass. It will extend to the floor, but some tenants may prefer to break it off and not go all the way to the floor level with that. That's up to the tenants. There are no tenants quite yet. That's an ongoing thing they've got. They are in discussions right now, but nobody has committed. We think as the DMV gets further along, the activity will increase on that. The awnings are not going to be canvas awnings. They are going to be metal awnings. So that, we know that was an important thing. And as far as the storefront and window trim material, it is architectural bronze, not black. We apologize. We know it looked like black in the renderings, but that is going to be architectural bronze. And obviously that'll change a little color with its age. So with that, we really appreciate Director Clary and her staff's work on this, going all the way back to the original site plan approval for the DMV and this retail building. Thank you, Tammy. You've really been a help through this process. So I'm here, Dr. Sachs is here. We're certainly happy to answer any questions you may have, but we appreciate your consideration of our architectural elevations under this corridor overlay district.
Thank you. Does any commissioners have any questions?
I have one. The side elevations, are there intentions, at least in this part of the design phase, to have any drive-throughs on either of those? It looks like it's potential, but
Drive-throughs? No, sir.
no drive-throughs, okay.
No, sir. Parking is going to go all the way around the building. There's not the logistics for that.
Gotcha.
Thank you for the question.
On your renderings now, the side buildings, the middle shows glass to the floor, the side buildings show black at the bottom. So does that mean that the sides are split already? Split window, solid at the bottom, glass on the top?
The sides are going to be split, and they can be either glass in both of them. I'm confident glass in both, or the bottom can be non-glass.
Well, for me, I'd like to see consistency. I don't want to see somebody on the left-hand side got full glass and the right-hand side have a break. I think the architecture needs to decide, we want this or that.
The plan,
I mean, I like how you have it on the rendering now where under the, I'm gonna call it under the awning where it's protected, it's split, and in the middle, it's to the ground. I mean, to me, that's attractive, the way it sets. I mean, I don't know what
So-
the plan is, if it's all glass or not, but the way it looks like you have it drawn is acceptable to me, so. But when you mentioned the tenant may adjust that, I think there needs to be some consistency there. You know, I'm a symmetry guy. I like symmetry. And so to have it symmetric and even and is very pleasing to me.
fair enough. How would we handle something like that? Would that be a third condition on the approval?
Yes.
If that is a
That would be correct.
big enough deal to the commission? Mhm.
And is this potentially a 2 to 4 tenant situation?
2 to 4, yes, ma'am. What I think the original idea is to have a restaurant in the middle and then small retail, whether it's a Verizon shop or something else on either side.
May not be this far into it, but signage. Are you going to do a monument sign out front, or are you going to put any type of lettering over each individual stall or each section? How is that going to be handled?
The original site plan that's approved does have signage. We have 2 monument signs, which were approved with a part of the site plan, one for the DMV, one for this other building. And I expect there's going to be, not individually lettered signs like you see now, not just a placard with somebody's logo on it. It would be individually lettered signs of which, with the tenant's name on it.
Well, I guess my point to that is the two center units would accommodate that very well. But with the architectural detail of the circle over the end units, that would certainly make lettering a challenge. And so for me, again, consistency there. You're going to allow one unit to do it, or are we going to do it on all four? Are we only going to do it on the middle units? I know we're not quite there yet because we don't know who's occupying the building. But
Right.
for me, how are we going to piecemeal the signage in, and are we going to see consistency? Is everything going to be the same color for all four buildings? Are we going to see different colors based on logos and colors of businesses coming in?
Oh, I'm confident it's definitely going to be different colors of the signage depending on who's in there. If it's a Verizon, it's going to be red. If it's a T-Mobile, it's going to be pink.
This is on the monument sign.
No,
The-
sign lettering
building?
on the
Design of
building.
building.
That's what I'm saying. I want to think about that because the architectural details of the circle are going to interfere with some degree of lettering up there.
You could put it on the awnings.
He brings up a good point. Would we split and have two circle features on either side and have signage in between? You bring up a good point, Dr. Pope.
Circles are very
He-
classic.
Right.
It gives it more architectural interest to have that there.
We totally agree with that. Well, they're saying it adds architectural interest, so they want the circles on there. And how they, but how they interface with the signage of the tenants is a question, and a legitimate question.
So my mind, again, I'm not telling you how to do your building, but my mind is you got your monument sign out front, this is what's here. It would be appropriate to put a sign underneath of the ceiling space on the walkway to say, here you are. Nothing on the front facade, but underneath would say, here's Nail Place, here's T-Mobile, here's Verizon, here's whatever.
Right.
Underneath, up under the ceiling. That was how you delineate it, but to leave the facade alone, in my opinion. So I'm thinking ahead for signage and where we are with this. One last thing to think about, on the Dollar General store, on the backside of this building, we're potentially going to have a development that's going to be staring at this. Obviously, it's not very attractive, but these are all necessities that you have to have. But on the Dollar General store, they have put a sidewalk behind their building approximately 6 to 8 feet wide and built a small brick wall, approximately 3 to 4 feet, maybe 4 feet high. At least to hide the bottom and at least to hide stuff that's going to accumulate behind this building at some point. Boxes, junk, things like that. Currently, the Dollar General has tons of merchandise dollies out back of theirs. Even though they're taller than the fence, at least helps to hide this. I think something in the back of this building and building an appropriate, I think brick would certainly be very attractive because it certainly would match the Dollar General, but I think you need to build something behind this building that at least helps hide this back facade to some degree, at least to dress it up, and at least to give the merchants a place to put stuff that they're going to store outdoors.
You're talking about just a knee wall or something, or?
4 feet high. You can't make it 8 feet high because then it becomes a security risk for people entering and exit from there. You need at least to have some visibility, since people can't hide back there from somebody leaving at 11 o'clock at night from their business. But it needs to, if you look at the Dollar General store, you'll see that they have about a 4 foot high fence, brick, that covers the whole back of their building, that actually makes the back of the building a little bit more tolerable based on, they have 4 heating and air conditioning units running from the ground. They don't really have any exits back there to my knowledge, but it's a way to dress up the back of the building since this is going to be viewed by a residential community at some point.
And I'm not trying to disagree with you. I'm not a fan of what's going on at the back of the Dollar General. Maybe it's the dollies more than the wall there. They've certainly been there in that situation for a long, long time without a neighbor really to the back side of that, and all they've got is that dead end drive aisle. We're going to have 3 bays of parking behind us, behind these shops. So I don't think you're just going to be staring at that, but your point's well taken.
The other thing is trash collection. Is this building, because I sent Tammy an email about what are we doing with trash, and she said based on the site plan, it's all contained at the DMV on the current dumpster site. But is one dumpster going to be enough for the DMV and 4 tenants?
We've got one enclosure with 2 full-size dumpsters in it in that same central location at the back center
And that's going
of
to
the
meet all the
lot,
needs?
and
of
that's
this?
going to be plenty. The DMV actually shreds most of their stuff and takes it off-site, so they're not a big user of the dumpster. The dumpsters were really for this retail and restaurant space more than the DMV.
And then another piece I'd asked for, because the site plan had been pre-approved, but how does the back of this building and sidewalk that goes to these doors then relate to the parking that's going to be pulling head-on to that? How wide is that? How much distance do we have between the building and front-end parking? Is this just a standard 6-foot sidewalk, or is the building going to end, it's going to be some grass spot, and then it's going to be some, I asked for the site plan on the overview on that to see how this building relates to the parking lot and everything else.
Mr. Chair, I swear I heard him say he had one more issue about 3 issues ago.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a site plan that shows you that. I have more copies for you. And there's about 8 feet behind the building before we get to the parking spaces. We do not have it shown as a sidewalk right now, but we can certainly put it as a concrete sidewalk. It's certainly going to be a barrier between the cars that are there pulling up and not being right in the doorways. Can I come back here? Thank you very much. So wrapping around both sides of, we're looking at the proposed retail restaurant space there on the left side of the site plan. And it's got 2 sidewalks going on the right and left sides of it that are hatched there. And those are both 6-foot sidewalks. You can see we've got about 8 feet behind the building. We don't have a sidewalk shown there, but we certainly can put a sidewalk there. We're going to need to do some kind of access pad or a sidewalk to get to the back doors, but not knowing at the time of the site plan what that resolution was going to be. We didn't put a sidewalk back there, but there certainly is the room for it. There it is.
So customers to this retail building will be entering both the front and the rear?
Not intended to be at the rear, no, sir. They'll be coming to the front. We expect that the employees would be parking in the back there.
Okay. Any more comment, Dr. Pope?
But again, I think you're going to have a residential community that's going to be looking at this back facade just as much as most of the community's looking at the front facade. And y'all put in fake dormers on the backside of the DMV in order to dress up that back facade and made that much nicer. I don't know what you call the parapet walls, but it almost would be nice to extend the parapet walls only so, because again, it's open in the back. It's going to be viewed. It's a road back there.
Mm-hmm.
So I want the back to be as nice as the sides.
Wow, okay.
I mean, I know you have to
That's-
have a ladder. I understand you have to have all these things. You have to have a steel door, but is there a way to dress it up for the people that have got to look at the back?
Another thing, and I'm sure I'm telling you something you don't know, but the way the property drops from South Church Street back to where you're talking about the future residential will be, there's a significant drop there. And I don't know if that would actually make the case more or make the case less for the knee wall or the 4-foot or 5-foot wall you're talking about. Because as the property is dropping back, people may see it out of their second-story windows, but they're probably not going to see much out of the first story and out of the ground level because they're going to be several feet, maybe even 6 feet lower in the residential portion behind than they are at the back and the drive aisle back there. He said he's okay with a parapet going across the back of the building, which
You're gonna have air
may.
conditioning units and everything else up there about that.
Eddie, if you're going to say a lot, you need to come up here and get it on the microphone.
Yes, please state your name and address, please.
Eddie Fredericks with the Woodard Group. And with the parapet going across the building, I think it will make it look a lot better and hide any future HVAC systems, which will all be up on the roof. So not opposed to that at all. I think we still would have that roof ladder visible and of course locked for safety. I don't think the knee wall being in the back is a good idea for our tenants. Our tenants aren't to keep anything outside. And it's a safety issue, I think, for people to hide as the employees are leaving in the middle of the night or whenever they would close.
That was leading to my question. The HVAC unit would be on the roof. Yes. And
Yes,
you're
sir.
aware that the ECO calls for that be hidden from the road traffic and such?
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely, yes, sir.
thank you.
I mean, y'all don't have to agree with me, but my opinion of this is the back needs to look as nice as the front, or, well, maybe not the front, but the sides. I think it needs to have some consistency back there. I think we owe it to the developer who's already been approved to do his stuff, and I'm hoping that we're maintaining some degree of respect for him. You don't have to agree with me, but I think
Well,
to
can
figure
you-
out what's the best way to dress up the back a little bit to.
Can you break up that sight line with some planted medians in those 12 spaces behind the building?
Oh, absolutely. That median between the two bays of 12 spaces behind the building are going to be planted.
And maybe put some larger caliber trees or something in there to break up that space and create some visual screening there.
It's a great
so the
idea,
neighbors
yes.
wouldn't have to view it that way.
Where is this?
So if they planted this, if there was room to put in some decent sized landscaping there, between those two sections of parking spaces, so you create like a visual barrier between the back of the building and
Right.
the townhomes that are coming in.
Yeah, I mean,
That
just
would be
something to hide the back.
Something that would break up the view, and it would be safer than I think the wall back there where people could hide.
And Dr. Pope, would you like to see maybe 3 awnings that kind of match the front or the sides there? Maybe the 2 middle doors under one and then one on either side. And that should break up that long wall.
I think it would add some visual interest to it, yes. Because if, on the back of the Royal Farms building, they just put a dead gable back there in order to dress up that back side. It's just a gable that looks like their front side
Right.
in order to just make it somewhat appealing back there. It's non-functional for them, I believe. But they also have a garage door in the back left corner of their building that's painted black, dark brown, that disappears. So dark paintings would certainly help hide the doors that y'all had suggested.
Okay.
And what about landscaping? Have we gotten past that point, or has that been settled as far as this?
Yes, sir, the landscaping plan was approved when the site plan was approved.
And it's not shown here, but would there be trees back here? Does anyone know? Anyone recall?
There are shrubs and smaller trees located along that back line that would border the rear of that property in its entirety.
That's between the parking lot and the road? There's a, yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
I've got one copy of the approved landscape plan.
Thank you.
So between the back drive aisle and the residential area behind, there's a strand of trees and shrubs. And we would certainly add them between those two bays of 12 parking spaces, intermediate.
We're pulling up the landscape.
There it is, super, thank you.
Okay, I got my visual. Randy, you see it?
I can see here. Dr. Pope, if you're looking to add up, beautify the back of the building, I'd be okay with it as presented with awnings.
Well, I think so too, after seeing the landscape and plan, because you've got crepe myrtles planted along the drive line back there.
Yeah.
That we would hope would be 25 to 30 feet tall. Don't know what species they are, but that would certainly shield it from the residential area that's back there. But yeah, I mean, doing something with the awnings on the back certainly would dress it up a little bit.
3 steel awnings over the back doors to match the front, absolutely.
In black or the bronze or,
The bronze, yes, sir. And the parapet to block anything that's on the roof.
for me, yes. Not sure how they feel.
Yeah, I think that would work.
I think it'd make it very attractive on the back. You know, so often commercial buildings are focused on 3 sides and not the back, and with the residential being behind it, I think that would really let people know that we care about what's going on. And if you guys agree with that, that certainly makes it a whole lot easier.
You bet,
And
we'd
appreciate it.
absolutely agree to those additional conditions.
Okay.
Can I add one suggestion? Might help us all out here on those circles. We have that up there. What if we put one on each side? Allowing the sign to go in the middle and add one to each tower in the rear to be more appealing to the neighborhood. So in the front, in case a tenant puts a sign up here, we'll just put an architectural element on each side of that as opposed to in the center.
You mean add 2 circles instead of 1,
Correct.
and then a sign in the middle?
Correct. And we'll add them to the rear right here as well, just on these 2 towers.
It's important for your tenants to have signage that can be seen from the street. I understand both sides of that. So that seems like a logical
It works for me.
fix.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Keep
More
the
circles,
character.
not less.
Dr. Pope?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I know you spent a lot of time on this, Dr. Pope, thank you.
These are quite a few changes. I don't want to send Dr. Sachs away without, so see you later, thanks for all the help, but I don't want to send him away. How do we address this so that the changes that we've offered tonight, I mean, I'd like to give a conditional approval with those changes, but I'd also kind of like to get a picture of them next month that says, yeah, we're good to go. I mean, is that a reasonable ask? Is that a reasonable ask of the developer? Let me start there. I mean, is that reasonable to you? or do you need to go? I mean, because first off, the other thing I add is that you gave us like 7 or 8 things to choose from. I really appreciate that. I thought that was a really, really good way to handle this. And I imagine your architect probably had some that he could choose from to design. So I really appreciate you guys working with us on that. So I don't want to hold you up. And I'd probably be okay with approving based on our recommendations tonight. But I'd prefer to do a conditional approval, and just so that we can see a picture of it next month and be like, all right, cool, that's exactly what we're talking about. But tell me first off, I mean, honestly, what are you guys looking for? We're looking to move. You're looking to move?
We're looking to move ahead. And
Okay.
if we can email you something and not have to wait until next month, we would be absolutely happy to do that. I hope you believe that we're all on the same page. And when we're saying more architectural circles,
Yeah.
not less, and when we're saying a parapet, whether one of you agrees or whether all of you agree, we're willing to do that.
Mr. Riddick, what are your thoughts there? You look like you maybe could walk us through
He's
that.
got that look.
Well, I just think, I think you should tell him what you want to do and approve it.
I agree.
Okay. I'm okay. And can we still get an architectural rendering next week?
Yes, you absolutely can. We're not going anywhere,
But
don't
it's still
worry.
a recommendation to the town council, and the town council has the,
No, we can approve this.
You can approve this.
You approve this.
Yeah,
Are you
it's-
getting
it's-
power?
You approve this. I
Mr.
bet-
Chairman, or if I may,
I bet Tammy's got a list of, did you keep a list of running changes?
Yes, sir. So it would be either all glass or consistently with that split with the black on the bottom. The rear is going to have 3 awnings, which will match the front. There will be 2 circles on each side of the units fronting South Church Street, and also 2 at the rear, along with that parapet roof, and provided that the rendering is provided next week.
100%, we're in agreement with that.
I think,
Okay.
as I recall, that covers
With,
all.
with those recommendations and the ones presented by Tammy and her staff report, I move that we approve as presented with those recommendations. I'm not sure,
Second.
six or 7 of them, whatever it was.
Third.
second.
We have a motion to recommend this application,
Yeah, approve it.
To approve.
to approve this application. With the new building conditions as requested here tonight, along with the conditions as stated by the planning directors, the staff, and a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
yes, one clarification point. On the back, the parapet walls, are they going to be level with the side columns on the back corner?
I don't think you want them level with the side columns. I think you want them shorter than the side columns for more architectural interest.
Well, my point on that is your back columns on the back corners are building height, whereas your front columns are 3 or 4 feet higher, whatever, I don't know what that dimension is. But if you're going to put the circles in them, would it not be more appropriate to have the back columns the same height as the front columns? Those 3 or 4 foot difference in there.
I don't think so, because as you look at the side elevation, you could actually put the circles at the same height, and then you've got the much higher wall at the front, which is broken by the molding, by the 2 sets of molding.
I got you. I said, I understand what you're saying. But on the back elevation, are the walls, the back corners, are they proud of the back wall, or are they flushed with the back wall with where the doors are? It looks like there's a shadow line, whether the program was trying to put a shadow line in from the sun or not, but it looks like, to me, they're proud of the back wall. Does that
You're
make
right.
sense?
I see that shadow line on the right side that you're looking at. And there is a little bit of a jut on those 2 back columns on right and left.
Okay, I'm fine with the circles that way then. I just wanted to make sure that those back columns are going to match or blend to whatever was appropriate for the front of the building.
Good point. Yes, sir.
I'm fine with the way we presented it. I just wanted that clarification.
With the parapet?
I think they've agreed to the
Yes.
parapet wall.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. No further discussion? No? Call for the vote.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hillegas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes. Motion is adopted.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
very much. Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
I would just like to add a note. I want to compliment Tammy. We sent 9 elevations out, and she sent it, I didn't have names of the people that replied, but most of the people replied almost immediately, and it allowed us to come up with a design that most people agreed on. And in the future, this may be the type of submissions that you want, because we get great feedback from you, and we don't keep spinning our wheels. And Tammy was really quick to get those out, and we got the replies, and that's how we came up with this design. Thank you.
Dr. Sykes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sachs.
Good night. Okay. We have 4 public hearings. Would anyone like a recess?
No, let's get these 4 public hearings done.
Let's power through.
Let's power through?
Power
Yes.
through.
Okay.
Why don't we move number 10 up since Mr. Little is here? Is any other applicant?
Mr. Brown's here as well.
We have
Okay.
2.
He's number
Let's
one on the
deal
list.
with the 2 that are here.
Okay.
Mr. Brown first, because Justin's on his way back.
Okay, Mr. Little, that would be 1409 South Church Street, right?
Let's start with 101 Moore Avenue, if we could.
Number
Okay,
7.
Is that,
That's
the
Mr.
applicant?
Brown here in
Yes.
the front,
okay, Mr. Brown, that's in the front, number 7.
number 7.
Okay. Tammy and I had discussed trying to combine all of them into one public hearing, but with the advice of town attorney,
I don't think you can do that. They're all stand on their own, they're all separate applicants.
yes,
Let's get on through them.
yes, we're trying to do it. Okay. Moving down to item number 7, this is a public hearing. This is a special use permit application, shipping containers. This is for 101 Moore Avenue, Brown Brothers, Carol Wesley Brown, the applicant. We have the report, please, Dr. DeClaire.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking approval to utilize an existing shipping container as an accessory structure at 101 Moore Avenue. Due to the recent changes in the zoning ordinance, a special use permit is required for shipping containers located in the HRC district. It is unknown how long the shipping container has been present on the property. However, approval of this special use permit would bring the property into compliance. The positives is this application brings the property into compliance as an existing shipping container is located on the property. Negatives, it is not a by right use and does require a special use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. No one signed up, I take it. So there's no one to speak in favor of or oppose.
Open and close it.
Public hearing thus is closed. Public hearing portion is closed. Would the applicant like to add anything? Okay. So, Planning Commission,
Mr.
comments.
Chairman, I make the motion that we approve as presented.
I just have one discussion item before we move on. This, because this concerns all of everything. We're given a special use permit, they can have expiration dates and deadlines and things on it. If this container should leak and he wants to replace it, what happens? How is, I mean, if we grant a special use permit, he can bring one in and out as much as he wants to, or what happens if it needs to be replaced? Or if they want to replace it, how would we know that?
You wouldn't know it unless he tells you.
Good
So in other
question.
words, it makes no difference if he can bring in a brand-new one tomorrow and leave it there for 50 more years, or is
No,
there?
I don't know that that's true. I think it's, I mean, if it goes, it goes.
If it goes, it's over.
It's over. Once he removes it, it's done.
So it can't be replaced?
No,
Not unless you give him permission.
we're essentially grandfathering those that are existing,
That's-
that were there before the
Yes.
ordinance change.
Correct.
If we grant the SUP. We
Yes.
don't have to grant them.
You do not.
If he were to wish to exchange it, he would have to come back for a new SUP.
Right.
We would have to
Okay.
change the,
Just want to make sure we know what the process
Yeah,
is before
because
we get into
The
it.
general theme is you don't like them that much, and so,
Right. right,
but they were here, their grandfather,
these have
and
been,
so,
yeah.
yeah, Mr. Bryan, he's a young man, he might be there a long time, but he may decide to sell and go someplace else, and, the special use follows the property, and if somebody removes it, that's it.
Okay, just want to make sure we understand what happens if it gets replaced or moved, or what's the process.
It cannot be replaced.
But following up on that, if one of these containers becomes dilapidated, you know, terrible condition, what do we have?
Well,
It's-
some of them already are.
Yeah. That ship has sailed.
You know, the upside, this one is behind a fence.
I'm not arguing for this one, I'm just saying in general, what are
Right.
we going to do with them in the future?
So we have no recourse for anything that's dilapidated.
Well, that's not entirely true, but we hope to have more recourse in the near future.
So can I add something?
Yes, sir. You come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
My name's Kevin Brown, and I think just in light of the meeting tonight, talking about aesthetics, the way that things look and all that, I would say even though the special use permit is in favor of us, that we may consider as a town, being that we are specifically in the middle of the town, that we set some sort of appearance guidelines with them. It's 100% my intention this spring to paint mine to match our building, as to allow that to kind of blend out of eyesight. I would also say that shipping containers can come in a multitude of different scales of quality and age. So it's something that maybe we all can sign off that it's not an 80-year-old shipping container, the roof's not rotted, that kind of thing. Like, I would be happy with that, because the whole purpose for us having shipping containers is to store large car parts, engines that are extremely valuable, that don't need to be outside or whatever. It doesn't do us any good for my particular building. I would say the same, they're a retail establishment. They're not gonna store stuff that is gonna be damaged by mold, water, that kind of thing. So I think we can all adhere to a certain standard of the shipping containers, because we do appreciate the special use permit. It's something that's, you know, we don't have to worry about in the future, but it's something that we should also kind of be in compliance with. So not some ratty old, you know, it's all dented up and rusted and beat to death. If we can all set like a general kind of standard that the roofs are in good shape, that we agree to abide by some sort of just minimum requirement of maintenance, and, you know, prevent them from being unesthetically pleasing. I know that mine can't be seen a tremendous amount, but the fact that it's white with a background of a green building, maybe some people don't want to look at that when they're getting their cheeseburgers and fries from McDonald's. So if we paint ours green, kind of goes away a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit more pleasing. So we wouldn't want one that's out there that's hot pink and black and holes in it and all that kind of stuff, because no one would want to look at that. So I propose that we do some sort of general, their building is basically tan, theirs could be tan, mine could be green, and just kind of hold an appearance standard. Maybe we police ourselves as part of the provision for the special use permit, because I do like the fact of everyone caring about what the town looks like. We do as well. The reason we have privacy fences, we have wrecked cars and we have all sorts of stuff that it's necessary evil of our business, but we also don't have any of that stuff out front. Out front is your Lexus and, my F-150 and, clean, nice retail-ish stuff to the best of our abilities. And they have a lot of, material as well that they need to run their business, but we can do that in a means where it's like kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I propose like a aesthetics standard to make this a little bit more amenable for everybody. So I just figured I would add that, so.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Well said. Any further comment?
Mr. Pratt, could you restate your motion, please?
My motion was to approve as presented.
Second.
No further discussion. We have a motion and a second to approve this application as presented. Call for the vote.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Make a
Kevin, you're
comment.
still welcome to paint it and keep it in good shape.
Can I make a comment? Dealing with this tonight is very different than dealing with a new SUP. Appearance and things of that are important in the future, but for the purposes of what we're doing tonight, appearance and all of that is beside the point at this point, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's true,
Yeah.
Okay.
It is what it is.
Okay.
but it was nice to have him
Yes.
state that for us to think about in the future.
Yes. Yes. Okay. We're moving down to item number 10. This is the public hearing, special use permit, application shipping container. This is for 1409 South Church Street. RJL, the third, I guess that's III, and ARL, LL, care of Bobby Little applicant. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking approval to utilize multiple existing shipping containers as accessory structures at 1409 South Church Street. Due to the changes in our zoning ordinance, these containers are located in the HRC district and do require an SUP. It is unknown how long the shipping containers have been present. However, approval of this SUP would bring the property into compliance. That would be the positives of the application. The negatives is an SUP is required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Public hearing is open. It's a given that we have no one to speak in opposition or for. Would the applicant like to add anything? I'm sure. And the public hearing portion of this is closed.
Bobby Little, residence is 501 Cranford Road, Smithfield. I don't have anything to add unless you've got some questions that I can clarify for you.
Well, as we all know, pretty much all this is to correct something that's pretty much grandfathered in.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve SUP for these existing 5 containers as presented.
Second.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a motion to approve this application as presented. This is for 5 containers currently there, and a second.
Just for clarification, it's a favorable recommendation to Town Council.
Yes.
Approve a favorable recommendation to Town Council. As presented. Call for the vote.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion is adopted. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. This takes us back to item number 8. The applicant doesn't appear to be here. This is a public hearing for special use permit, application shipping containers. This is 600 West Main Street, New Day Land, LLC, care of Larry Rowland, the applicant. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking approval to utilize 5 existing shipping containers as accessory structures at 600 West Main Street. This is because they are located in the HRC and I-1 district. It is unknown how long they have been present. However, a special use permit would bring the property into compliance, which is the positive of this application. The negative is it's not a by right use, and a SUP is required. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's not 5 on this one, are there really, Terry?
Says 3.
There's 3 that are visible from West Main Street. However, when I did speak to the applicant, he indicated that he had 5 total on the property.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And again, this property does encompass Powerhouse Equipment and the Smithfield Body and Frame, and it goes all the way down Pole Road. It is one large parcel.
Okay. Public hearing is open. Seeing none. Nothing, no one in favor of or opposition. Public hearing closed. Planning Commission comments. No Planning Commission comments. Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion to approve this application as presented and a second.
For clarification.
Favorable recommendation.
Yes, thank you. A favorable recommendation to Town Council.
Forgot, yes, thank you for.
For recommendation. We have a motion and a second to give a favorable recommendation to Town Council concerning this application as presented with staff report conditions. Call for the vote.
Mr. Davison?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hillegas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes.
Thank you.
This motion, this application is adopted. And this takes us to number 9, item number 9, public hearing. This is a special use permit application, shipping container. This is for 901 West Main Street. This is DVB Properties, LLC, care of Vicki Brown, applicant. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking approval to utilize 3 existing shipping containers as accessory structures because they are located in the I-1 district. It is unknown how long they've been present. However, SUP would bring them into compliance, which is a positive of this application. A negative is it's not a by right use and does require an SUP. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Public hearing open. Seeing none to speak in favor of or against, public hearing closed. The applicant is not here. Any Planning Commission comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on this one alone, I'm in favor of recommending it, but what I want to do is approve the shipping containers, or make a favorable recommendation to approve shipping containers for storage of material inside or around, but not on top of the shipping containers. We have some, looks like an axle and wheels, and I'm not sure what the other square object is. But I don't want to get in the precedent of allowing stuff to be stored on top of the containers, but inside them or around them is perfectly acceptable. You guys okay with that?
Yes, as a condition of approval, yes. Recommendation.
If so, then I make a recommendation that we have a favorable recommendation to Town Council for the special use permit on these shipping containers, provided that there is no material stored on top of the shipping containers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this application with the conditions of town staff and additional conditions as presented here tonight, that nothing be stored on top. This is a recommendation to the Town Council for approval. Any further discussion? Okay. We have the recommendation and a second. Call for the vote.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes.
Thank you.
A motion to adopt this application?
Not on this application, something different before we move.
I'm sorry?
When you're finished, I got a question.
Okay. Yes. This application, the motion is to adopt this application. The recommendation for approval to town council has been adopted. Yes, sir. Dr. Pope.
You'd indicated Mr. Rowland said he had 5 spaces, even though we only identified 3. What happens in the future if a business has a container that we don't know about, but it has been there for a long period of time? We're obviously bringing them into date tonight. But what happens if this is found a year from now, 2 years from now? We know they didn't bring it in yesterday, but it's there. Nobody found it, nobody saw it. What would happen? How would they get special use permit? How would they proceed? Because if I brought one into my business today and dropped it, you would immediately tell me to remove it. But if somebody already has it, we don't know how long it's been there, how would they rectify that situation?
So for your.
So like if we approved 3 tonight, but Mr. Rowland says, wait, I got 2 more, you didn't approve those, what do I do with those? How do we rectify that situation if they were not discovered by y'all, town staff?
So we're going on the honor system with the applicants. He did divulge that there were a total of 5. We had initially only identified 3 that we could visually see from our property. If we did identify a shipping container, for example, at your location, we would let you know that you would need to pay for and apply for a special use permit.
But-
We would then bring it as an after the fact.
Yeah, so let's say there was a business like Smithfield Lumber that's been closed for a number of years, but there's a container there, and somebody discovers it and they want to bring it into compliance, even though we didn't identify it today, there may or may not be one there. But how would they fix that? Would they just do the application and move forward, and just do it like you were trying to bring one in today?
We would bring the application to Planning Commission. We would identify, we don't know how long it's been there, and kind of use the applicant's information, what they said they brought it in to provide to the Planning Commission.
Okay, I'm just wondering what happens if there's something we didn't discover.
Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. Moving on to our last item, item number 11. This is approval of Tuesday, August 8th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Mr.
Attorney
Chairman,
Riddick.
I recommend approval as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion to adopt the minutes has been approved. No business, no new business. This meeting is adjourned.